Hello and welcome to the Captain DevOps channel, and today is the second video for the AI July series of videos that I'm doing here. And today we'll be taking a look at the first course of the Microsoft Learn courses, which is the Develop Generative AI Apps in Azure. So there are a couple of modules here, and we'll be taking a look of sort of all of them. And I'll be sort of skimming over them, sort of trying to create a mental map here for us to take a look at, and sort of discuss a little bit about it in the end. So let's begin. So yeah, Microsoft offers. So this is pretty much just the basic plan and prepare to develop AI solutions on Azure. So there are a couple of very high-level overview of the AI services here. So if we take a look. The growth in the use of AI in general and generative AI in particular means that the developers are increasingly required to create comprehensive AI solutions. So Microsoft provides multiple services that you can use to create AI solutions. It's useful to consider the available options for services, tools, and frameworks, as well as some principles and practices that can help you succeed. So this is very true, especially because, in my opinion, all AI apps are sort of a subset of software in general. So as a rule of thumb, best practices in software development tend to apply to AI development as well, because they are very much similar in that sense. This module explores some of the key considerations for planning an AI development project and introduces Azure AI Foundry, a comprehensive platform for AI development on Microsoft Azure. So let's see what is AI. So this is a lot of text, but we'll be just taking a very brief look of what it's trying to say here. And it's been around for many years, which is to say that it's not only generative AI, which is the first item here in this list. Are built on machine learning models that encapsulate semantic relationships found in huge quantities of data, enable applications to appear to interpret input in various formats, reason over the input data, and generate appropriate responses and predictions. So, in other words, it's AI is pretty much a thing. Like you can think of AI as a. I don't need to gesture. You can just make some drawing here to illustrate my point. AI is a bit of a black box here, and usually we send a lot of data in. So this is data, and out comes more data, which is the output. And usually, this is just a very broad version of a black box here, but the difference in AI is usually when we want to do sort of a black box system that receives an input and generates an output, we usually need to think about all of the possibilities and try to program everything ourselves. The case of AI is you can feed it a lot of sample data usually, and this is called training. So training, and based on this training, the AI itself gets better and better as you reward it, and then it gets it improves over time as more and more training happens, and the outputs it generates are usually better. We'll be probably going a bit deeper on this black box itself and what the training data actually is, and what AI is under the hood here. But I think this is a very good definition today. So yeah, let's take a look into the types of AI, right? So generative AI, which is ChatGPT, for example, which is very big right now. Also agents, which are very big, which are also generative AI applications that can do things on behalf of someone else. So you can have like an AI agent to sort of handle your email for you, for example. We also have computer vision and speech and natural language processing and information extraction, and decision support, which is most likely machine learning models very fine-tuned to a specific domain. For example, economic factors or demographic data, and so on and so forth. These types of AI right here, they are not generative, which is very important to note because they all kind of come before the generative AI boom that exists today, at least in 2025. But they are also very important because they have their own little, very specialized applications, which generative AI sort of can do, but usually it's more expensive and doesn't perform as well as a model trained just for computer vision, for example, right? Yeah, so I'm not going to go too deep into this, but a closer look at generative AI. So they Gen AI represents the latest advance in artificial intelligence and deserves some extra attention. So it uses language models to respond to natural language prompts, enabling you to build conversational apps and agents that support research, content creation, and task automations in ways that were previously unimaginable. So I'm just going to set this to the side here, and there is my Animal Crossing background here. But I'm going to search for a specific video on 3Blue1Brown channel, which is the playlist about LLMs, which is very interesting, and I'll be very careful to, yeah, maybe this will be a sort of a good sample of videos to show here. So there are a couple of videos about this topic in the 3Blue1Brown channel, but if you want to go very deep into what AI is and what actually happens and what are transformers, which are the T in GPT, then I highly recommend you take a look into these videos because they go very deep into the math. But they also provide a very high level overview into the deeper aspects of AI that usually these Microsoft Learn courses don't usually guide you through. But let's see, right? What else we can find out here about AI. So the language models, yeah, they can be large language models on huge volumes of data and include many millions of parameters. We'll talk about parameters later. And this is my Alexa talking. Yeah. They can be small language models that are optimized for specific scenarios with lower overhead. So language models commonly respond to text-based prompts with natural language text, so increasingly new multimodal models are able to handle image or speech prompts and respond by generating text called speech or images. So the modes here are sort of text to text, or maybe text to image, or maybe text to video, for example, or the other way around. There's a very recent new model on, not sure if it's a model, but it's an AI product which is Google Gemini Veo, which generates like very realistic video, for example, which is an example of a multi-modal AI. I think it's Sora from ChatGPT, which also gets a text prompt and generates an image. These are an example of multimodal things. Alright, so hopefully that didn't bother the recording too much. But next we are going to look into the Azure AI services. So here we can see a list of all of the services currently in Azure that we can use, and all of them have AI in the name and some sort of AI in its usage. So we can take a look here and let's just talk a little bit about them. I have used a couple of them in the past, so I'll be able to skim most of this. But Azure OpenAI is pretty much, it started out as a standalone service, but now it's just sort of a shortcut to deploy an OpenAI specific model in Azure AI Foundry. This is a bit complicated to wrap your head around because now Azure AI Foundry sort of is the basis for everything AI related in Azure, but before it wasn't, so they needed to create this new resource type. But Azure OpenAI models, which you can use to deploy OpenAI models in Azure, and there are a lot of parameters and SKUs and a lot of customization options that you can use. Azure AI Vision, which is a lot of APIs that interact with images and video. There is inside this, I was going to talk about Azure Face API, but we'll get there. Azure AI Speech, which you can implement text to speech and speech to text. AI language, which is natural language processing, which we'll probably take a look at into the later modules here. Also the content safety, which is sort of a guardrail that sort of filters the output of AI on a couple of axes, like offensive context or self-harm, for example. You can sort of reduce your tolerance for these types of things. Also, Azure AI Translator, which is, as you would expect, a translator. Azure AI Face, which is very specialized on faces. It can detect faces, detect their expressions. It can also be used to identify people and sort of identify the difference between me right here in front of the camera and someone with my picture in the front of the camera, sort of trying to pretend that it's me. Though these latter features are usually blocked, they are gated right now. I'm not sure if they are going to be more broadly available in the future. Custom vision, which is custom computer vision models. Document intelligence, which is sort of an OCR, but not just OCR. It's sort of creating and training models to get fields from documents, which just says here. Content understanding, which is you can sort of hook it up into like a lot of formats of different types of documents, and it's going to sort of extract their meaning. And Azure AI Search, which is a very fundamental building block when we are talking about AI on Azure. I think like a parenthesis here, Azure AI Search is the less AI related thing out of all of them here, because Azure AI Search pretty much uses different types of algorithms to work. So you can think about in the beginning, Google had its own search engine algorithm, and it sort of had a way to find out which results were more relevant. And at the time, I think it was the 2000s, it didn't really use that much AI, though after a while they started using it, and Azure AI Search sort of gets the same functionality and exposes it as sort of your own search index that you can sort of create your own search engine on top of. So this is very important, because when we are talking about AI and we have like huge amounts of data that AI needs to search on, it's very important for the AI itself to produce the searches that it needs, and for these searches to be very relevant. So Azure AI Search is going to play a very important role here. And you can see here that it's commonly used to create vector indexes, which are that can then be used to ground prompts submitted to generative AI language models. So a vector index, we'll probably touch on this a bit later down the line, but these are, you can say, a bit of what's happening under the hood of AI here. You can sort of think about AI really thinks about everything in terms of very huge. Let me see if I can get it here. Very huge arrays. Not really arrays technically, but you can think about them like that. So maybe 1, 2.5, 3, whatever. 0.1, and maybe 10. Negative 10. Awesome. So you can think about this very long array of numbers, of floating point numbers specifically, and this is pretty much a vector. And what this vector encodes is the meaning of a specific thing. How a meaning is translated into numbers is what the actual AI does, or rather the indexing does. But this is then used from Azure AI Search, for example, to sort of compare the closest angle or something between all of these numbers here in the array, and at the end you can sort of find what the closest meaning is between two unrelated things. So maybe with traditional text search you wouldn't get that, because Usually text search usually search for an exact match on words. So for example, if I search for result, I probably won't get anything here in this image, for example, even though there is a very similar concept, which is output. But using this method, we can do things exactly right like that. And Azure AI Search also has a way to combine both of these methods of search, so things work out pretty nicely in the end. Considerations for resources: we can create one or more on the portal. What else? Custom vision service. What else? What else? Yes, we can use infrastructure as code. It's better to provision services as part of an AI Foundry project. Yes. Single service or multi-service resource. Let's see. Let's take a look. Most AI services and so on can be provisioned as standalone resources. Additionally, standalone Azure AI services often include a free tier SKU with limited functionality. But you can also provision a multi-service resource that encapsulates multiple AI services in a single Azure resource. And this can make it easier to manage application that uses multiple capabilities. So today there are these two. And I have the very strong impression that Microsoft is hoping that we all use the Azure AI Foundry, especially because of all of the discussions surrounding it. But you can see here that AI Foundry has everything that the AI services also had. Previously, this was called Cognitive Services, I think. But yeah, I think that's sort of a transitioning point currently. Regional availability and cost. There are different pricing scheme, and this is all on a case-by-case basis. So we won't go too deep into this for now. Azure AI Foundry is a platform for AI development. So you can provision individual services on Azure itself, but Azure AI Foundry is the recommended way to do it. So we can take a look at the structure thing, at the structure of projects here. So you can manage resource connections, data code, and other elements of the AI solution in projects. So there are two kind of projects. So let's maybe take a note of this right here. Maybe let's go here and type Azure AI Foundry and make this text a little bit bigger. And so first type of project here is the Foundry project here, which are associated with the resource in a subscription, Azure AI Foundry resource. Yep. So they provide support for AI Foundry models and tools and evaluation, most common AI development tasks, to develop generative AI chat apps and agents. This is the right level of resource centralization and minimum of administrative resource management. So work in projects that are based in Foundry resources. And there are also the hub-based projects, which are Azure AI Hub resource in Azure. So maybe that's the first point of differentiation here. So let's maybe take a note of this. So 2 is the Hub project. In Azure, this becomes a Azure AI Hub, and the Foundry project on Azure AI Foundry. I think that's it, right? Yeah. And this text is going to be to the left here. Let's see. They include an Azure AI Foundry resource, as well as managed compute, prompt flow development, and connected Azure storage and Azure Key Vault resources. So these are more advanced, obviously. So maybe let's make the difference here of them being more advanced. They come with provisioned compute, key vault, storage, and this is probably the recommended for most projects here. Yeah, I think this sort of sums it up pretty nicely. And let's take a look at the developer tools and SDKs here. Yeah, there are many SDKs, but what developer? Let's see. People might prefer Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code. Of course, it's Microsoft, so they are just going to talk about these two. But we can see there is an extension for Visual Studio Code that we can test things directly in it without going to the browser. Also, it talks about GitHub and GitHub Copilot, which are very heavily pushed by Microsoft right now, and also the SDKs, which are a lot of them. So the Azure AI Foundry SDK, the Models API for working with the model endpoints, the OpenAI API, which is specifically for OpenAI models, and this we'll talk about later probably, but you can talk with OpenAI models using two different SDKs or APIs, but I think the recommended approach is using the same API that works with other types of models, so you don't get locked in. What else? AI Services SDK is the service-specific libraries. Also the agent service, which can be integrated with semantic kernel. Okay, so semantic kernel we'll probably also talk about more in the future, but just so we have a baseline today, it's sort of a framework to manage AI agent applications. So you can think of an agent as a single AI thinking unit, and you can combine a bunch of them. You can give one of them access to other tools, and then comes the concept of MCP service and agent-to-agent protocols and whatnot. But we'll get there when we'll get there. So responsible AI. Let's take a look into this. So there are a couple of principles that Microsoft adopts for responsible AI. So yeah, these are very usually when we try to program something, we sort of have an idea of what the program itself does. Not really. Usually, you can think about very famous stories of software that made things go very wrong that people didn't intend for it to do. But in general, we sort of know what is the scope of what a software is capable of doing. AI sort of changes this because we don't really know what AI is going to put out there in the world on behalf of us, the developers. So we sort of need to take this with a different approach. So Microsoft has a couple of principles here. So fairness. So this talks about sort of guaranteeing that machine learning models and AI models in general are fair. So there can be a lot of biases when training models, either because of the amount of data that's available, or I don't know, giving advantage to specific stereotypes, for example. And we don't want AI to do that. Let's just leave these to the humans, because AI is probably going to take them over anyway. And yeah, reliability and safety is another principle, because yep, I think this is sort of self-explanatory. But yeah, AI should be as reliable as possible, and if we cannot fully rely on AI, then we must be aware of it. So we need to so here you can see, for example, we need to take into account the probabilistic nature of machine learning models and apply appropriate thresholds when evaluating confidence scores for predictions. So AI is not 100% assertive all of the time. So this is what we need to keep in mind always when working with AI, is because sometimes it does things very confidently that it should not be doing. So this is a very key concept here. Also, privacy and security. Always respect privacy. AI relies on very large volumes of data. Maybe some of this data is only accessible to a specific group of people, and other people besides from that group cannot get access to that sensitive data through AI. So AI needs to sort of be aware of the specific permissioning schemes that exist. And there are some, yeah, I think even after models are trained and the system is in production, they use new data to make predictions, or they take action that may be subject to privacy or security concerns, so appropriate safeguards to protect data and customer content must be implemented. So this is also very important in AI. Also inclusiveness, which sort of goes hand in hand with the fairness, but this is very specific about benefiting everyone regardless of who they are. Let's see. Also, this talks about getting testing your application with a very diverse group of people, which is important since you want the most amount of people to use your application, right? And transparency. So people should be aware that a system uses AI, how it's using AI, and where the AI sort of can go wrong. So very, very important here as well. And also factors that impact the accuracy of the predictions, the confidence score for predictions as well, and what else? And this is also sort of related to the GDPR and other similar laws that exist about data and user privacy on the world. Accountability. Even though we use AI to work for us, ultimately we are responsible for what it does, so we cannot be negligent. So I think that's pretty much it. So there is an exercise here, so let's take a look into it and see. If you have an Azure subscription, you can explore Azure AI Foundry for yourself. What's this exercise? Let's just take a look into here. Oh, it's a GitHub lab. Okay. Well, maybe we'll keep this lab for the next video, and I think let's try to just go to the next unit here and sort of provide a quiz. So which Azure resource provides language and vision services from a single endpoint? So this would be the Azure AI services, I think. So keep in mind I'm going through this courses at the same time as you are, so I'm not fully familiar with everything, so I may get a couple of things wrong here and embarrass myself, but that's par for the course. You plan to create a simple chat app that uses a generative AI model. What kind of project should you create? Let's maybe use an Azure AI Foundry project, which, as we saw here, is the recommended for most projects because it's sort of simpler to manage, and which SDK enables you to connect to resources in a project. So that's probably going to be the Azure AI Services SDK, because the resources, I think the resources they are talking about here are different types of AI services. So let's see. And I got that one wrong, but I probably had to retake the questions here to go through. So it's probably then the AI Foundry SDK, and this other two we already know that we got it right. So here, let's see. Yeah, that's it. So this is the summary for the module. We explore some of the key considerations when planning and preparing for an AI application development, and also became familiar with Azure AI Foundry. And on the next video, we'll be taking a look at this lab here and do a couple of experiments with Azure AI Foundry itself. I already have an Azure subscription that I'll be using for that, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye bye.